Musk to vote Republican and no dumbest bill in America. This is Mark Fisher with Mark and the Millennials. And the millennial joining me today is, of course, Christopher Hopkins, our producer on the other side of the camera. Welcome, everyone. This podcast is called, and you won't believe it, Musk, as in Elon Musk, is to vote Republican. He's going to vote Republican, and he never does. Okay? So we have a couple of really interesting stories about this. First up, in the Hill, in the Hill newspaper, kind of an inside newspaper about politics in Washington, D.C., as well as state capitals. Musk says he'll be voting for GOP, says Twitter has a very far left bias. We're reading something that you already know and think is obvious. Ladies and gentlemen, the difference is when you're Elon Musk and you are the richest man in the world and you have a friend group that consists of the most important and successful people in Silicon Valley, people that you have investments, in their companies, you've had long-term relationships with in business, and also personally, you are probably going to influence people in Silicon Valley to come your way. So this is huge because no one in Silicon Valley ever talks about voting Republican or even anything Republican. They just cancel you, of course. So Tesla CEO Elon Musk said in a podcast episode on Monday, it was the All In podcast, by the way, that he would be voting for Republicans in the upcoming November midterm elections after overwhelmingly voting for Democrats in the past. I saw this podcast, by the way. It's really good, the All In podcast. Quote, the reality is that Twitter at this point, has a very far left bias. And I could classify myself as a moderate, neither a Republican nor Democrat, Musk said on the All In podcast published Monday during a tech conference in Miami. And in fact, I have voted overwhelmingly for Democrats, historically overwhelmingly. I'm not sure, Musk said. I'm not sure. I might have never voted for a Republican. Just to be clear, but this election, I will. Later on in the podcast, Musk claimed that the Democrat Party was overly controlled by labor unions, and President Biden, he said, is too much captured by the unions. Quote, the issue here is that the Democrat Party is overly controlled by the unions and the trial lawyers, particularly the class action lawyers. And generally, if you'll see something that is not on the interest of the people on the Democrat side, said Musk, it's going to come because of the unions, Musk said. And then, to be fair, he said, on the Republican side, there's this, if you say, where does something not ideal happening? Of course, Musk is always says the word like. It's because of corporate evil and religious zealotry. But that's generally where the bad things will be coming from on the Republican side that are not representative of the people, he added. Following Musk's deal to acquire Twitter late last month, conservatives cheered the sale, with many seeing him as a supporter of free speech. The Tesla CEO, however, said last week that the acquisition was paused pending details supporting a calculation that there are a lot of spam fake accounts and bots that represent 5%, according to the Twitter CEO. Musk said it on the All In podcast, it's at least 20%. He said that. I saw the whole podcast. So, podcast listeners, here is the takeaway here. If you were to watch the All In podcast, it was in front of a live audience in Miami. And the hosts were interviewing via Zoom Elon Musk about his businesses, his plans for Twitter and so forth, and left-wing bias, just general things that you'd want to know from such a successful business person, given the current environment that we are in the United States. So here's what Musk said that was interesting. He said, not only have I always voted for Democrats and never voted Republican, I never really thought about it, but now I think that things are way out of whack. And he said, for example, his Tesla Gigafactory, is a mile long. The building is a mile long. He said the Gigafactory that he built to manufacture and assemble the Teslas, the cars, was built in Texas. It's a mile long. He said it's operating. It's in full operation mode. He said, now, if I wanted to build that in California, which I tried to, he said, I'd still be trying to get the permits today. But now I'm open in Texas. He said, there's an example. He said, the thing is, we're not able to talk anymore about what is working and what is not working. And Musk is very matter of fact about what is working and what is not working. And the All In podcast hosts said to Musk, well, what about, like the whole free speech thing and Twitter and the far left bias? And he said, now, of course, why this is even necessary, but it is by rich people now to talk about it, especially the tech side, because they don't talk about this anymore. Musk said to the audience, well, I just think that if you're being canceled, you really should have a right for your words to be heard. And I don't see why that's an issue on Twitter. And in the United States, we stand for free speech, and so do democracies. And there was a huge resounding applause. Now, keep in mind, like if a politician said that, you would expect the politician to say that. Okay, certainly on the right, you would expect that. But why did Musk get this massive round of applause? He got this massive round of applause because no one is used to hearing a tech executive talk this way, right? You're not used to tech executives saying, I think there should be free speech, and that is the bulwark of democracy, and it's so important for us to have it and to support it and find ways to encourage it and expand it. Well, no tech people talk that way. In fact, we have a couple of actually clips coming, I think, later in the podcast, if I am correct, don't we, Chris? About this very issue, where folks who work for Twitter, all right, they were in a social environment, in a restaurant or a bar, and they basically disclosed that there is left-wing bias. But before we do that, I want to talk to you about how Elon Musk responded to a long thread from the Twitter CEO on Twitter. It's so funny. You're going to love this. In the Daily Caller, Elon Musk, podcast listeners, sent the smiling poop emoji to the CEO of Twitter, Parag Agrawal. Did you hear this? In response to a lengthy Twitter thread Monday talking about the risk of spam. I guess that's how you say his name, Agrawal. Yeah, I think it's Agrawal outlined how the company targets fake and spam Twitter accounts. Remember, this is the CEO of Twitter, describing the 500,000 spam accounts suspended daily and millions of suspected spam accounts locked on a weekly basis. He also warned many accounts that appear fake are often authentic, while actual spam accounts can appear legitimate. Quote, we suspend over 500,000 spam accounts every day, said the CEO of Twitter. And he continued, usually before any of you even see them on Twitter, we cancel them. We suspend them. We also lock millions of accounts each week that we suspect may be spam. If they can't pass human verification challenges, then we block the accounts and get rid of them. Then he says, the hard challenge is that many accounts which look fake superficially are actually real people. And some of the spam accounts, which are actually the most dangerous and cause the most harm to our users, can look totally legitimate on the surface. So remember what he said here. He's saying, it's too hard for us to identify real accounts that may seem fake, meaning that it's Twitter's get out of jail free card for canceling conservatives, right? Oh, and who would say such a thing as we should have free speech? We need to cancel that. Must be a bot. Must be spam. So he then says, unfortunately, this is the CEO of Twitter. You're going to love this. Unfortunately, we don't believe that this specific estimation of how many bots and spam accounts there are can be performed externally, given the critical need to use both public and private information, which we can't share. We cannot share that. Externally, it's not even possible to know which accounts are counted as fake or real on any given day. Elon Musk responded with one thing, an emoji, the poop emoji that's smiling. Literally. Can you imagine? Here's the guy that's going to buy the company that you are the CEO of. And he has such little respect for you and thinks you are so full of it that he puts that up there, the poop emoji, and is like, no. That's your job. This is your job. You have one thing, right, that's really important, and that's to have a legitimate news site, legitimate news feed, if you will, service that basically is able to identify and sort out fake accounts from real accounts, just to make it simple. You have that job. And what you're saying is, oh, we can't do that. Why do you folks suppose that is the case? Well, one is they can hide behind that when you have Joe Biden getting, tens of thousands of retweets, which are bots, I'm sure. Or alternatively, you can also make it seem like Twitter has so many people on it that disagree with Republicans when so many of them are also spam accounts, fake accounts, bots, etc. That's why they're doing it. There's one more reason, and that is that when Twitter sells advertising, they can tell their advertisers what? Oh, guess how many active users we have? We have so many active users when in fact, they don't even have close to that. So as a result of all of this, Elon Musk wants a potential price reduction of what he's paying for Twitter. He hasn't closed on the deal yet because he's asked the CEO, how many fake accounts are there? Tell me, and tell me real soon, or I'm going to just assume that it's probably in the 20% range, which is what Elon Musk said on the All In podcast. He said, I'm pretty sure at least 20% of the accounts are fake. Pretty incredible stuff, ladies and gentlemen, because you have somebody named Elon Musk, the richest man in the world, who is buying Twitter, I have no doubt, for the purpose of making money. Good for him. But at the same time, opening up democracy to free speech again and showing the American people what it looks like to be a real CEO. Namely, the job of Twitter is to make money and to be an open service for everybody that wants to post, no matter what they say, because that's what a free society does. And now it's all being exposed. And you have Elon Musk saying, I'm going to vote Republican. And what do you think the other tech executives are going to do? They're probably never going to say it, but they're going to think about what Elon Musk just said, which is he's going to vote Republican. He tried to stay in California. He couldn't. It was impossible. California is an awful place to do business, and it's getting worse. So therefore, what do you think is going to happen? Well, more tech executives might actually start giving money to Republicans, and more tech executives might also decide that they are going to maybe move their companies outside of state. So next up, podcast listeners, CNBC interviews Pete Buttigieg. So CNBC is the NBC news channel. It is notoriously woke. And I'd say for the most part, the folks that are the hosts there are left-wingers. It's hard to believe, how can you be a left-wing business person? But they are. Nonetheless, they were interviewing Pete Buttigieg. And in the Daily Caller, we have this article. CNBC, we have a clip coming up on this too. It's pretty wild. CNBC host Andrew Ross Sorkin, I guess he has three names. Andrew Ross Sorkin. I'm not sure which one is his married name. I guess maybe he took his wife's name. Confronted Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg on the administration's plans to tackle inflation during Monday's Squawk Box. Sorkin brought up the issue of the administration's plans to raise corporate taxes in light of President Joe Biden's tweet Friday, urging that the wealthiest corporations pay their fair share in order to bring down inflation. Okay, same old talking point of the Democrats. You're not paying your fair share. That's why we have inflation. Ladies and gentlemen, we have this clip. if you know anything about economics, and I know our podcast listeners do, and it doesn't matter if you're a Democrat or Republican, just listen to this clip of Pete Buttigieg, who, by the way, went to an Ivy League. Okay, an Ivy League, supposedly one of the smartest people in the country. Listen to his response from CNBC concerning inflation and taxing the rich and taxing those terrible corporations which are causing inflation. We have the clip, and here it is.
On the corporate tax front, and look, I've talked about how you could raise corporate taxes from where they are today. So we're not so far off here. But do you not agree that these are two different issues? Meaning, if you change corporate taxes, yes, in the immediate term, maybe it will have some impact on inflation, but corporate tax is a long-term issue. You either deal with it because you think it's the right thing to do or it's the wrong thing to do, not because you're trying to deal with inflation right this second.
Well, I think a lot of it is what you're going to do with the revenue. And again, we have an agenda to use tax revenue on things that are going to ease inflationary pressures. But also, we have a very clear contrast right now, right? You have Senate Republican proposals that are about raising taxes on the poor and the middle class. And you have the president's worldview, which is shared by the majority of Americans, that if anybody needs to be carrying more of the load right now, it is the wealthiest and corporations that have become extremely profitable. By the way, corporations also that have often, well, hold on, this is really important. Well, corporations that have invoked inflation as an excuse to keep prices high in ways that are not just reflected by the supply picture and are pocketing the difference.
We are going to leave the conversation there. It is a much...
So that's the conversation that Pete Buttigieg had with CNBC host Sorkin. And the thing is, ladies and gentlemen, you have Pete Buttigieg saying that we have inflation because corporate America is charging too much for their products. You know, that's when you buy the products that corporate America makes, they're just increasing the price intentionally to gouge you. They're trying to gouge you, ladies and gentlemen. And therefore, what we need to do is solve that problem by taxing corporate America and corporations who make things more. So if we tax them more, do you think corporate America will increase their prices? Or do you think they'll decrease their prices? Let's think that through. Moreover, Pete Buttigieg says when we tax them, we are going to use that money for really good things in government. Well, that's the problem. Government keeps spending. There's so much money supply in the economy, way too much money chasing way too few goods. Okay, supply and demand. And therefore, we have this problem with inflation. But Pete Buttigieg is all in. It's like, nah, we need to keep taxing, keep spending, and that is going to solve inflation. So who would talk this way? Well, someone who is willing to lie about anything, or someone like Pete Buttigieg, who is smart enough to know that what he is saying is really Marxism and socialism. Literally, Pete Buttigieg's solution is to put in price controls on companies, which means, of course, you're not going to have enough of anything. Why would you make anything if you can't make money on it? Because the government has put price controls on you. Okay, I have an example for you. There's a company out in Illinois that makes towers, cell towers. I know a little bit about this. Won't say why. They manufacture poles. So the poles are for utility lines and for cell towers. So it's just a single pole. So if you see a pole down the street that's holding the wires for electricity, this company does that. Anyway, back on the subject. The company makes them because of the input prices to make steel. The companies had to increase prices by 30 and 40%. So if the government were to step in saying, you, Mr. Corporation, are charging way too much for this product, so therefore we're going to put price controls in, you must now reduce the cost that you are charging, or the price that you are charging of these poles. Therefore, you're not going to make any, right? You're going to look at it and go, well, then if the input prices are greater than the price that I can charge, or if it's only like a few percent more, it's really not worth my time. I'm probably better off sitting on the couch and, watching TV. This is what Pete Buttigieg is suggesting. And in the Soviet Union, ladies and gentlemen, and in North Korea, and in Venezuela, and in Cuba, what is it that you don't have enough of? Everything. You don't have enough of anything in these countries because Marxism, when it is in full bloom, requires that it's not worth your time to even work to make things and to be entrepreneurial because you have the government constantly saying, I'm going to take all of your profit and because you're charging too much, you're evil, you're terrible. This is why those countries are failing. By the way, this is why our country is failing now because the Marxists are in charge, including and especially Pete Buttigieg. So I just want you to take this in consideration. This guy is not dumb. He's really smart, Pete Buttigieg. He knows what he's saying. He's lying to you. He's hoping enough people are being miseducated about what a free society is supposed to mean so that at one point and at some point in America, there can be a tipping point whereby the Democrats completely take control of the economy, of all means of production. The government controls all means of production, all prices, and we have a Marxist society where there's nothing but misery. And we're well on our way there now. So next up, podcast listeners, Nancy Pelosi snaps after top Republicans blame her for the baby formula shortage that Democrats have sent instead to the border. Okay, now you've heard this already, right? There's a baby formula shortage, very briefly. And there are a lot of reasons why there's a baby formula shortage. One is the FDA shut down a plant without ever having a conversation about whether or not the plant provided more of the baby formula in the United States than someone else could make up the difference, right? So there's that. And then there's, well, the baby formula that we have, let's send to the border and buy off all of the illegals coming across the border because, you know, when you buy them off with all this free stuff, they're going to vote Democrat, which is what all this is about, of course. So Pelosi is feeling the heat because Democrat moms, independent moms, and Republican moms are upset beyond belief and calling Democrats and Republicans in Congress and saying, this has got to end. You need to fix this, okay? This isn't a political matter. This is a life and death matter. And so Pelosi was so upset. What she did was she pulled the Pete Buttigieg thing by saying, well, you know, when this is all done, we're probably going to indict people, meaning she's going to indict like corporate execs and so forth. I don't know if any of this is true or not, right? But I suspect the Democrats, even if it is true, okay, even if it is true that the primary makers of baby formula, one in particular, which was shut down by the FDA, should have been shut down. Even if that were true, the government was still asleep at the wheel on trying to get them to reopen so we didn't have the shortage, number one. And number two, the government exacerbated the shortage by sending it to the border. I mean, this is all common sense. And so everyday Americans can figure this out quite easily. And by that, everyday Americans, I'm referring specifically to all parties. Because as I mentioned, it is a matter of life and death for so many families. And if that weren't enough, a really weird article came out about this baby formula shortage. And I wanted to talk about this briefly because this baby formula shortage thing is just, to me, bizarre. I mean, I have people coming to me saying everything from, you see, Mark, they just want us all dead, to people saying, no, what they're really trying to do is just control us in every way imaginable. So who's the they? Get this. In the Gateway Pundit, Bill Gates, Mark Zuckerberg, Jeff Bezos invested in lab-produced breast milk to prevent effects of climate change. An article published by Daily Mail on June 19th, 2020, revealed that Bill Gates, Mark Zuckerberg, Jeff Bezos, and other billionaires invested in a new startup company to produce artificial breast milk from cultured human mammary, glands, I'm guessing. According to the article, U.S. firm BioMILQ, so BioMQ, has received $3.5 million from an investment fund that is co-founded by Bill Gates, Jeff Bezos, Richard Branson, and Mark Zuckerberg to prevent climate change due to gases created in formula manufacturing. Ladies and gentlemen, do you believe this for 1 minute? Do you believe for 1 minute that formula manufacturing should be shut down because of gases that are created as a result of making the baby formula, which keeps babies alive. Well, Bill Gates does, Jeff Bezos does, Richard Branson and Mark Zuckerberg, they all believe that it does. Or is it really just about control and money? An artificial breast milk startup that offers a green alternative to baby formula has received $3.5 million from an investment fund, of course, controlled and co-founded by Bill Gates. It has been estimated that around 10% of the global dairy industry, a major producer of greenhouse gases, is used to manufacture baby formula. The $1 billion fund, Breakthrough Energy Ventures, was established to help prevent the worst effects of climate change arising from carbon emissions. So I'm going to stop here because do you recall, ladies and gentlemen, that Bill Gates also invested heavily in companies that make meat substitute products? You know, you buy a hamburger, but it's really not hamburger. It's not real meat. It's made, it's all plant-based. So Bill Gates has invested heavily in those things because of climate change. Cows fart, way too much gas. And Bill Gates has now invested in a baby formula manufacturer because of cows farting. So he's trying to stop you from eating meat, and he's trying to stop you from drinking milk because he wants to kill all the cows. And he also wants to control your food supply. Remember, he's also one of the largest landowners in the United States. Remember that? So alongside Mr. Gates, the group's other members include Amazon CEO Jeff Bezos, Virgin Group founder Sir Branson, and Facebook chief Mark Zuckerberg. According to the company's website in 2021, they successfully produced the world's first cell-cultured human milk outside of the breast. Our team is thrilled to announce that we have produced the world's first cell-cultured human breast milk outside of the breast. We find ourselves at the frontier of lactation science, helping to advance the entire field by putting mothers and babies at the forefront. Oh, sure you are. I'm sure you're putting mothers and babies at the forefront. You're putting your wallet and control at the forefront. According to UC Davis, human milk researcher and BioM Milk technical advisor, that's the company that's making this stuff, Dr. Jennifer Smilowitz, there's a name, Smilowitz, human milk is tremendously complex in both composition and structure, which has made it impossible to replicate outside of the lactating parent. Until now. In just 11 months, we have moved the field of lactation science from the proof of concept to proof of complexity, producing milk compositions that look more like a symphony than a concerto. So this article goes on. And as you can imagine, ladies and gentlemen, there's an issue, okay? We have these billionaires who are trying to use their money to do good. Elon Musk. We have these billionaires who are trying to generate more control, and they're trying to control you financially, and they're trying to control your food supply, because what happens when they control your food supply? They control everything. And those billionaires, ladies and gentlemen, are doing it under the guise of climate change, because that justifies any action that they take to establish complete control over your life, in which case we are no longer free. And these also happen to be tech executives. Isn't that interesting? The same people that are trying to silence you from criticizing them on various services like Twitter and Facebook. Interesting, huh? How it's all connected? So then Candace Owens, she tweets out, doesn't Bill Gates just have the best luck? Just like with the COVID vaccine, he makes an investment and then suddenly there's a pandemic or shortage and everyone must line up for his product. Of course, he's invested in lab-produced breast milk all of a sudden too. Interesting, right? So I was actually talking this over with someone yesterday. So the FDA shuts down, I think, the largest producer of formula in the United States. And they did so, I think, several months ago. Bill Gates just happens to be making this product. In addition to that, we have all these folks who are running food processing plants across America where small planes are randomly crashing into them and blowing up, and they are catching on fire. Anyone see a connection? Bill Gates, largest landowner in the United States. By landowner, he's buying farms specifically. See a connection? Bill Gates investing in formula manufacturers under the guise of it's the only right formula because it's climate change safe. And Bill Gates investing in alternative plant-based meats. This is weird stuff. I got to tell you, it's really kind of scary. In my mind, it determines, to me, more than ever, and makes me more resolved than ever, that we must start having open platforms so people can talk about these things freely and that it's reported freely so we understand what's really happening. Climate change is being used by the rich and powerful to take over every aspect of your life and to make you feel guilty for living your lives. You must stop this nonsense, and we must stop this nonsense now. So next up, ladies and gentlemen, not just women are getting pregnant, you know. Well, you might have heard this before, except that, you know, the protesters that were downtown in Washington, D.C., protesting about the Roe v. Wade issue. Of course, the actual opinion voted by the court has not happened yet, but the left is going crazy and they are downtown and they are saying everything that you can possibly imagine about Republicans and babies and who can get pregnant. We have this clip. We have to play it for you. It's 21 seconds. Listen very carefully to how mentally ill the left is. Okay? And I have to say this. I'm not happy that people are mentally ill. I'm not happy. Okay? That's not my point. My point is when we recognize it, we must call it out. And that's what I'm doing here. We also should laugh, you know, because you have to have a good laugh at someone who really takes themselves so seriously they believe that men can get pregnant. So we have a clip where not just women are getting pregnant. This is one of the marchers, one of the many that were interviewed downtown. I think it was by Project Veritas. We have that clip, and here it is.
It's not just women that are getting pregnant. Trans men they have uteruses. I have a trans man child. Out of my 7 kids, half of them are in the rainbow. It's his right to choose. If his dysphoria is so bad that he can't handle a pregnancy, it is not my right or anybody else's right to make that choice for my child.
So, it's not her right. It's no one's right to take away the choice of men to get pregnant. That's what she said. It's not her right or anyone's right to take away men's ability to get pregnant, and certainly her son should be able to get pregnant if he wants to. You heard that correctly. Can you say mentally ill? All right. And this is what happens when you have a substandard public school system and a substandard higher ed system, which we've talked about before. This is what, and by the way, you don't have an opportunity to even have your common sense posts seen because they're hidden, or the fact checkers on Facebook or Twitter, you know, hide them or fact check it. Oh, actually, men can get pregnant. It's really not true. Or they just cancel you, or they put in some algorithm that no one actually sees your post. So therefore, you have these idiots who watch CNN and MSNBC, and they go on Twitter and they only get to see things that they hear that sound right, which is men can get pregnant. So next up, speaking of which, Wisconsin middle schoolers accused of sexual harassment for using the wrong pronouns. Middle schoolers. 3 students at a Wisconsin middle school are facing allegations of sexual harassment under Title IX after they repeatedly refused to use them, they, or I think it's they, them, pronouns when addressing a fellow student. So, the Wisconsin middle school and the 3 students are facing sexual harassment charges under Title IX because they repeatedly refuse to use, quote, they, them, end quote, pronouns when addressing one of their fellow middle school students. Now, think about this, ladies and gentlemen. You meet someone in middle school, and it's a guy, and he's like, I want to be called they, them. Like, okay, well, they means and them means, it means that those pronouns, it means there are more than one. Okay? You are not more than one. So there's a problem. Attorneys for the Wisconsin Institute of Law and Liberty demanded that the Kiel area school district stop the Title IX investigation into the 3 male students at Kiel Middle School. Quote, the complaint against these boys and the district's ongoing investigation are wholly inappropriate and should be immediately dismissed, the Institute wrote in a letter to administrators. The mere use of biologically correct pronouns not only does not constitute sexual harassment under Title IX or the district's own policy, it is also speech protected by the First Amendment. Yeah, and you want to know why it's protected by the First Amendment? Because it's true! You're not a they, them. Napa School District offers special ethnic studies guidance for white teachers. Well, we're not even going to talk about that. We're just talking about this Wisconsin thing, right? And this is what the left is doing. Okay, first, they try to confuse you. Then they dummy down public education to the point that you actually think that men can get pregnant and that a single person can be more than one at the same time. And then they sue you when you don't submit. And that's why they love courts so much. So, as you already know, and to prove the point, of course, if I were to put this story on Twitter and give my opinion, which I just gave, namely, hey, folks, on Twitter, look what happened in Wisconsin. You know, there's no such thing as they, them, because you are a single person. You are not a multiple person. And therefore, they, them is wrong. And it means that you probably, if not most definitely, have a mental health issue because you were just one person. I am sure Twitter would just completely and utterly cancel my account, or at the very least, delete that comment. Proof be told. Get this. In the Daily Caller, Twitter does not believe in free speech, says a Twitter employee. The colleagues are commie as F, using the F-bomb. His colleagues are as commie as F. And this is a report. Project Veritas released video footage Monday night claiming to show a senior Twitter engineer saying how the company does not believe in free speech and that his colleagues who hate Elon Musk are commie as F-bomb. Project Veritas claims to have interviewed senior engineer Siru Murugesan, who appears to say during a discussion about Musk's takeover that Twitter does not believe in free speech, according to video footage. Elon Musk believes in free speech, he says. Musk has called himself a free speech absolutist and said Twitter serves as the de facto public town square, adding that failing to adhere to free speech principles fundamentally undermines democracy. Okay, when he said that, by the way, when he said that in the All In podcast, he got a massive round of applause, just massive, because this guy is so incredibly respected by his peers in the technology space. So, ladies and gentlemen, we have a series of 2 clips of this gentleman, and he's talking to Project Veritas. It looks like in a bar. It's a little hard to hear because obviously there's a lot of background noise in the bar. First up, here's the gentleman talking about Twitter, and we got to listen to this. Here it is.
Twitter does not believe in free speech.
What do you
Elon
mean?
believes in free speech. Capitalists, if we weren't really operating like capitalists more, we were very socialist. Like we're all like communist. Ideologically, it does not make sense, like because we're actually censoring the right, not the left. Because everyone on the right wing will be like, "Bro, it's okay to say, just gotta tolerate it." The left will be like, "No, I'm not gonna tolerate it. I need it censored, or else I'm not gonna be on the platform." So it does serve the right. It's true. There is a bias.
But I don't know if the two parties can truly coexist on one platform.
What do your colleagues say about it? Like,
They hate it. Oh my god, I'm at least like okay with it, but some of my colleagues are like super left.
what are they saying?
They're like, this will be my last day if it happens.
Do you see that? So, folks, look, this guy, he said, many of his colleagues are saying, this will be my last day if Elon Musk takes over and tells us that we can't censor people and remove the posts of conservatives and cancel people as well. It'll be my last day. What a bunch of children. You know, that's why I've talked so many times on this podcast about the 15-year-olds at Twitter and Facebook who work as fact checkers, It's like, I can't handle that. I'm only used to getting a participation trophy. I can't handle things that I don't agree with. And so the conversation continues, Project Veritas, with these two gentlemen at Twitter. And the question arises, how have things changed since Elon Musk's offer to purchase Twitter? Once again, this is worth listening to. A lot of background noise. Listen carefully. Here's the clip.
Has much changed since Elon's coming out?
A lot has changed. A lot has changed. We're all worried for our jobs.
Why are you guys so worried?
Our jobs are at stake. He's
I started working for Twitter and became I think it's just the environment. You're there, you become safe, calm.
We did all.
So they're saying we're really afraid our jobs might be at stake. They might be at stake because we might actually have to do our jobs, namely to find ways for Twitter to make money and to be what Twitter was intended to be, which is a news feed, and as Elon Musk says, a town hall. It's like the new town hall, but a national town hall. But we're afraid we're going to lose our jobs because, we want to continue. We want to continue telling people what they can and can't say. It's just unbelievable. And it's also unbelievable that one of the colleagues said in the previous clip, well, I came here and I was kind of in the middle. And then you become a commie really fast because everybody around you is a commie. So therefore you feel like you have to be a communist, which is what he meant by commie. Just incredible. Incredible. And I just can only hope that Elon Musk, it shows you the power of Elon Musk, namely that these guys are really afraid of someone who knows how the technology works, wants to improve the technology, and wants to improve conversation in America because free speech is always the way that you ultimately get to the truth. So next up, podcast listeners, hot off the press, the Biden administration pauses controversial disinformation governance board. Okay? They are pausing it, not canceling it, pausing the disinformation governance board. Just reported in the New York Post. Chris, the podcast producer, just sent this to me. Christopher Hopkins. The Biden administration has reportedly paused its controversial plans for a disinformation governance board after facing criticism from free speech advocates and conservatives. The Homeland Security Board was set to be led by Director Nina Jankowicz and had a mandate to fight the spread of disinformation that can affect border security, Americans' safety during disasters, and public trust in our democratic institutions. But following a backlash from Republicans and some liberals who likened the board to an Orwellian ministry of truth, the Washington Post reported on Wednesday that the initiative has been put on hold. The DHS decided to shut down the board on Monday, and Jankowicz had written a resignation letter by Tuesday. Think about that. So DHS, Department of Homeland Security, decided to shut down the board on Monday. I'm not sure I believe this, okay? I know that's what they're saying, but you know as well as I do that they're going to still figure out a way of having a disinformation board somehow in the government. And Jankowicz had written a resignation letter on Tuesday, according to the report. DHS officials then reportedly gave Jankowicz the opportunity to stay on, and she is. But she's evaluating her options, the Washington Post said. So in other words, she really hasn't left. She submitted her resignation, but they want her to stay on. Why do you think they want her to stay on? I mean, do you believe for 1 minute, ladies and gentlemen, that the Biden administration doesn't want this to come to fruition, namely to have a disinformation board with her ahead of it? Of course they want it. They just want you to forget about it. And they figure as time goes by, 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, it'll be in full force and effect and operating, and you'll forget that it's there. You'll just forget, because that's what these crooked politicians are doing that are controlling the White House right now, namely Barack Obama. A DHS spokesman told the Washington Post that Jankowicz has been subjected to unjustified and vile personal attacks and physical threats, and said she is eminently qualified. Jankowicz has caught flack from conservatives over ideas including letting verified Twitter users edit other users' tweets. Again, ladies and gentlemen, You've heard us talk a lot about Twitter, this podcast. Jankowicz, okay, the lady who would be head of the disinformation board, has caught a lot of criticism from conservatives because she believes that verified Twitter users, so there's a special verification that would occur by Twitter, would have the right to edit your tweet. It's exactly like 1984. Literally, it's 1984. Can't make this stuff up. And so this is hot off the press, as I said, and we can only hope that this is really going to be an agency that will never occur, this disinformation board. But trust me, ladies and gentlemen, they're lying. They have every intent of making this stay and stick, and they have every intent of making sure that you just forget about it. And when the press is no longer watching, such as it is, it'll be up and running right before the general election. Of course it will. Well, that's it from Mark and the Millennials. Thank you for joining Mark and Millennials. This is Mark Fisher. Thank you to our producer, Christopher Hopkins. Check us out on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Getter, Truth Social, Rumble, and our website. See you next time.